Hey buddies, I'm Swoggy here, coming at you with another Borderlands 3 video. Today we're going to be going over an Amara build that uses the Blade Fury. Now the Blade Fury deals melee damage, weapon damage, and splash damage all at once, so it gains multipliers from all three of those weapon types, which is very useful. Just to show you the pure power of this build, I am going to real quick show you me killing the Seer, which has around 10 billion HP in just about 5 seconds. So we're going to drop in, throw the fish slap, shoot her a couple of times, and bam, she's instantly down. But before we get into it, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and let's get into it.
Legendary? Whoa! No way, dude!
Pretty much the basis of this build is going to be phase slam, because there's lots and lots of power we can get for this weapon by using some phase slam anointments. Now there's a phase slam anointment that I'm using in the Blade Fury that pretty much gives us weapon increase by 300% for a short time. And then on top of that, we also have our revolter here that after using phase slam, we gain melee damage is increased by 200%. If we don't feel like using a revolter, I like to use the brawler ward. Now the brawler ward is pretty much when the shields are depleted, it's going to give us an additional 300% melee damage. But the reason why I am using a low level revolter is because the best thing you can do on this build is to give it elemental damage, because elemental damage is going to double dip in the damage formula for melee damage, which is very nice. So a revolter is very nice. So the reason why I'm using a low level one is because I want it to deplete and still be able to have the anointment that increases our melee damage to increase our damage by even more at all times. Now the way we're going to proc the revolter without having the anointment to proc it is that we're going to be using a spiritual driver. Now every time we activate our action skill, it's going to apply the element to us. On top of that, our gun damage is going to increase the faster and faster we move. So pretty much what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be activating my action skill. It's going to immediately deplete my shield because it puts a pretty decently high dot on us, and now we have a revolter effect and a powerful melee bonus damage effect on our revolter, which is just really good. It's a really good combo that I would highly recommend. On top of that, the spiritual driver that we're using has splash damage, weapon damage, and melee damage to optimize those 3 damage types that the Blade Fury does provide us. On top of that, I am also using a white elephant elemental projector. Now I opted to go with a white elephant only because of the fact that the explosions will allow us to increase our ground breaker damage when they go off. On top of that, the white elephant does have some awesome multipliers with the sticky bombs because it's going to use splash damage and area effect damage added together to form its own multiplier for the sticky bomb. So it's very nice. I'm not sure if you would really consider that a double dip, but it pretty much uses splash damage for our Blade Fury and then the stickies, which is pretty nice. If you'd like, you could also try to use an Unleash the Dragon. Now the reason why I'm not using the Unleash the Dragon for my preference is because Unleash the Dragon dot that it puts on the enemy doesn't actually increase our damage we deal with Groundbreaker, because the dot damage it provides don't go into the Groundbreaker formula, so I don't like to use it for that reason. Instead, I like to use the white elephant just so we can get some nice little bonus melee damage from the Groundbreaker perk if they ever set off. On top of that, we have the elemental projector, which pretty much allows us to synergize with the driver. So once again, when we activate our action skill, it's going to put a shock dot on us, which works with the elemental projector to increase their damage by even further. That's pretty much all the synergies I use to allow us to kill the Seer, which has 10 billion HP really quickly. Besides that, I'm using a elemental fish slap grenade to allow us to gain some pretty gnarly damage numbers when we throw it out. On top of that, it has action skill N to increase our bonus shock damage as well, so we can get more and more shock damage on the build so we can benefit the most from our elemental projector. Now let's go into the Malawan takedown just so I can showcase how powerful this build really is. After I'm done showing it off on some of the enemies and perhaps the Valkyrie squad, I will show the skill trees just so we don't get too carried away and forget about showing the skill tree, because I know sometimes I'll forget on some videos. So the name of the game, this build, because of the fact that we have all these phase slam anointments and action skill end things, pretty much what we want to do is activate our action skill as soon as possible and then just pretty much go firing at any enemy we see. We're going to be one-shotting every single person without even Groundbreaker perks, which is very nice, only because of the way that the damage formula works with elemental damage with melee. So that's very nice. On top of that, the build we're running here does have some sustenance on it, which allows us to gain our HP back on action skill hit and our grenade hits, which is very nice. And since some of the skill tree perks that we have give us shock damage for our gun as well, we're also able to get some sustenance from that. but most of the sustenance damage that we're getting back is going to be from our anointment action skill end, bonus shock damage. So don't expect to see most of the lifesteal gain from the actual skill tree. It's going to be primarily from the action skill end. So make sure to have an action skill end of some kind for sustenance stacks, so you don't have to waste your time using a knife drain artifact, which is a factor into this build if you'd like to not use an elemental projector at all. Personally, I would recommend using an elemental projector because the more elemental damage we can get on our melee hits, the better, because of the way that it double dips into the damage formula. So as I've been talking, I haven't really got a chance to really demonstrate anything in particular. I've pretty much been flying through these enemies. I didn't really need to think too hard on that, which is very, very nice. It allows me to kind of talk about the build. But I hope you guys are seeing how powerful this build is just from a first glance. So we're about to see how much damage we can deal against the Valkyries real quick. We should just be able to one-tap them like that. Very, very easy. And now we just got to wait for some of the ads. I might skip some of the ads just so we can see how much damage we deal against the bosses. So now that the boss is here, I'm just going to tap him once or twice and it immediately goes down very, very easily. I didn't need to throw any fish slap to proc any groundbreaker perks or anything like that. I just needed to activate my action skill, and then I just killed all the enemies around me very, very easily. Now, if you don't have your action skill up, I would recommend throwing out a fish slap, because then you would have some groundbreaker perks to optimize your damage even more. But most of your damage is going to be coming after you send out your action skill, so definitely make sure to send those out as much as possible. Now, the reason why we're using this action skill, Phase Flare variant, is because this is the fastest Phase Flare that comes... Hold on, I've been saying Phase Flare. I meant to say Phase Slam. This is the fastest Phase Slam that comes back on a cooldown, so make sure to use this variant because it's going to be coming back as quickly as possible, which is going to be allowing you to get all those crazy double dip formulas with elemental damage and such. So just like that, all the Valkyries got done in just a few seconds, and we're running really fast because of the spiritual driver, which in turn also increases our total weapon damage, which is very, very nice. Now that we are at the halfway point, I'm going to show the skill tree real quick and kind of break down why I'm choosing these skills, and hopefully explain to you why this is probably your most optimized Blade Fury build. So what you're going to be going for is pretty much as in the red tree, trying to get down to sustenance, but there's also 3 points into indiscriminate, which is going to allow you to excel your build from mobbing very, very strong. Pretty much the points up here are just kind of filler. They allow you to get down here. Of course, the status effect damage would help if you have Unleash the Dragon, so I like to put 5 points in there. I don't like to put any points into Infusion, only because of the way that it splits the damage and then just puts it as a flat shock damage, and it usually doesn't respond too well to a lot of other items. So I personally like to stay away from Infusion. Perhaps you guys could enlighten me on why maybe I should use Infusion with this build, but let's move down to Tempest. Tempest just increases our total elemental damage by 30%, which is really, really good. On top of that, an additional 20% damage for shock, so we can optimize the shock damage we're dealing, because that's the name of the game with this build, dealing as much shock damage as possible with our melee, so it double dips in the melee formula. And then we have Illuminated Fist, which doesn't actually give us action skill elements on our melee hits with the Blade Fury, so don't be expecting to see shock damage or any of your action skill elements on your Blade Fury hits when you hit with it due to the skill. It's just going to give you an increase of damage, which is still nice. And then here's just 1 point in Wildfire, just because I need to get down further in the skill tree and I didn't think anything else would really help. 3 points in Discriminate, as I said before, and then 2 points into the skill point, not necessarily because it's good, mainly for filler, just so we can get down to sustenance. Now we move on to the green tree. The green tree is going to be a little bit of a mixed bag for you. This is where you're going to get a decent amount of your melee damage for the build, but you're also going to want to get 3 points into Personal Space. Personal Space is a skill that you should get with any Amara build that's doing gun damage, because of the fact that it increases your damage no matter the distance. Sure, you're going to get an increase of damage when you're close, but the multiplier that it gives your gun damage is really, really good, even if you're really far away. So make sure to get 3 points into that. We got 2 points in Clarity, kind of just for filler, but we got 5 points into Arm Steel. We got more splash damage, which is good because splash damage increases the Blade Fury's damage. And then we have 3 points in Mindfulness, so we can run as fast as possible. Running faster with the Spiritual Driver, everyone knows that leads to more damage, so that is good to have. And then we have 1 point in Defiant our center to increase our melee damage after we activate our action skill, and just a general melee damage increase, which is very, very nice. Then the purple tree is where you're going to be getting, I say, the most bang for your buck with everything for the rest of the build. It's going to be 5 points in the heavy rain because of splash damage. Splash damage is always good to have. 5 points in no mistakes in nature every time we apply a status effect, which is going to be pretty often since we have Revolter and a couple other things I'll show you in a few seconds. So that's just a free 65% more melee damage. We got 5 points in the Trust in Yourself. This just allows us to reload faster, and we're going to be getting our shields breaking constantly. So that's really, really good. We're going to get increased reload speed at all times. And then we have Combo Breaker. Now, the skill that we're using here, Fracture, as I said before, is going to come back the fastest compared to any Phase Slam ability. Now, this ability in the past did not work with Phase Slam anointments, but it does now. So this, as opposed to Downfall and the regular Phase Slam, comes back way faster than any other Phase Slam ability. So make sure to get this. It's 28-second cooldown. This one's 47-second cooldown. Really like that ability. I wish it was better. 35-second cooldown for regular Phase Slam, so always make sure to get Fractured. Now, Combo Breaker will allow us to get our action skill back really, really quickly when we kill an enemy with melee damage, which is going to be at all times for this build. So we get our action skill back really quickly, and even if for some reason we don't proc Combo Breaker, it comes back quickly in general. So that's just free. 5 points in the burn both ends. Pretty much every single time we take damage up to a max stack of 15, we get 5% more damage. So for at max stacks, that's going to be 75% more damage, which is just incredible. Then we got 5 points into Joyful Freedom. Basically activating our action skill is going to increase our melee damage. So once again, more melee damage equals more damage in general for us. And then Body and Mind, basically when we kill an enemy, that's where you're seeing all those novas on the enemies when we hit them with the Blade Fury. Those novas deal splash damage. Since we have a bunch of splash damage multipliers, does decent damage. And then finally, Clear the Mind, which allows us to ignore elemental damage resistance, which is very useful, especially when we're not facing enemies with shields, only due to the fact that most health pools are pretty resistant to shock. And then we just have 5 points into Do Harm just to increase our action skill damage. That's kind of throwaway. I'll be honest, you could probably put that somewhere else, but the action skill damage, I believe, does help us with some of the other perks that we do have in the skill tree. So I like to always have that just in case it helps that. And now I'm going to meet you at Wutan real quick. So I'm just going to use the same method that I use with every single other enemy. I'm going to activate my action skill, and then I'm just going to start shooting. And then pretty much it's going to do the rest of the work for us. Very, very easy to kill with this build. Nothing really too hard to talk about. Nothing too complicated you need to do. Very easy in general. Most of your damage window is going to be after you activate your action skill, so sometimes you'll see that your damage will falter, so don't worry about that. And just like that, the better half is done, and then we're just going to kill the small one right here, the other half, and just a few seconds. So it's very, very easy to kill with this build. You don't even have to think very hard. You just got to activate your Phase Slam, and then you're good to go. And your Phase Slam comes back so quickly, so there isn't really much else to like say for the build. You just activate your action skill, and then you just go ham around all the enemies around you. Does good with mobbing, does good with bossing. Very easy build to do. Use a Blade Fury with action skill and bonus weapon damage, Revolter, Fish Slap, Elemental Projector, White Elephant, and a Spiritual Diver. This is going to be your most optimized build for Amara with this weapon. That's pretty much the build. If you guys have any questions on it, feel free to comment down below. But as always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I hope y'all have a great day. Bye-bye.
And the last shall be first to immerse in a pass out heat, facing him up with a moxie melt till he woke up drowning in tchotchke hell. War in a cave with a torch on a wall, then a window arrangement of porcelain dolls.